Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Graduate Club. My name is David Stevenson, and I serve as the President and CEO of the Central Connecticut Coast YMCA. Our YMCA is made up of 12 branches serving the cities of New Haven and Bridgeport and 25 neighboring towns. We also have a wonderful kids camp up in Mount Washington, Massachusetts that we operate through. So it's a great pleasure to have you here. We've got a really great morning planned for you. Dr. Jeanette Nicodex, one of our great volunteer board members, will join us shortly, and I think we're just going to have a very, very good morning. We had a great experience last night at Career High School here in New Haven. I think some of you, I know some of you here, joined us for a really excellent workshop. We went on a really terrific outdoor walk, about 45 minutes, and everyone was really paying attention. And I've been on these walks several times now, and I learned a lot about how we can engineer cities to support public health and physical activity. So Mark will share a little bit more about that with us shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, here are the facts. The average American child spends 6 hours in front of an electronic screen every day. 2/3 of our neighbors here in Connecticut are obese or overweight, and those numbers climb in our urban areas. Almost 50% of the adults in the state of Connecticut have been diagnosed by their physician with a chronic disease, including heart disease, hypertension, hyperlipidemia, asthma, cancer. What's the great news? There is great hope. By working together, we can really make an impact and significant change what's going on in our communities. That's the great news. So I'd like to share with you that we do things today with partners, correct? When people come together, that's how we address problems and make lasting solutions. So today we have with us CARE, a really fantastic organization here in New Haven, the Community Alliance for Research and Engagement at the Yale University School of Public Health. We're very pleased to have Mr. Doug Houseling with us today, representing the City of New Haven and the Director of New Haven's Department of Transportation. And Doug, why don't I just ask you, would you like to share a few words while we're moving along?
I know a lot of you are wondering what we're doing at breakfast so early in the morning on a jury day. But it was about a year ago when we met in Dallas on a similar occasion and really heard about how we can turn our greatest assets, our public spaces, into assets for our health and our long-term community health. I'd like to recognize a lot of my colleagues from City Hall that are here today. There's actually too numerous to mention, but I will say Martha just came in. So Dr. Okafor is our Community Services Administrator, and she completely understands the built environment and health and the impacts. So I'd just like to thank everyone, especially the Y and CARE, for once again bringing the team together, and the New Haven Hospital as well for being there at the table. So thank you so much, and David.
Thank you, Doug. And I'd like to recognize Andor Piche from Yale New Haven Hospital. Just give us a wave there, Andy. And let's give it an applause. Yale New Haven is our breakfast sponsor this morning. So this delicious, healthy breakfast, thank you very much. We appreciate it. And I'd like to thank the members of our team at the YMCA for the great work that they've done on this project. Mr. Christian Engel, our Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer. There's Christian right back there. Barbara Moore, the Executive Director of our Valley YMCA, who has been helping to lead this project. And I'd also like to recognize Donna Licitano, who is our Director of Communications and Marketing at our YMCA. So thank you all very much. And some of you know that we work very closely with the YMCA of the USA. And today it's our pleasure to have Kenitra Robinson here today representing YUSA. Thanks for being here. So you all brave the raindrops. So our child care staff affectionately refers to this as liquid sunshine. So we're glad that you're with us this morning. My guess is that with all the traffic challenges that we're going to have people just joining us as the morning goes on. So what I'd like to do is those folks that come in, stop and get some breakfast, have a seat. We're a pretty informal group, and then we'll get moving along. You know, the city of New Haven is a happening place. We have lived here for about 4 years, and in the short time that we've been here, we have seen such great positive changes here in the city. Our new mayor, Mayor Tony Hart, who is unfortunately not able to be with us this morning. She was called to New York yesterday. Has done fantastic work in not even a year as mayor. We know that Mayor Hart served in the Connecticut Senate for more than 20 years and was a great champion for education, for health, for employment, for wellness, for public safety. And we're very thankful to the leadership that she's bringing to the city of New Haven and the great changes that she and her team are making. But it's our great pleasure to have her Chief of Staff, Tomas Reyes, with us this morning. Tomas, can I invite you to come up and say a few words?
Thank you, Dave. Good morning. Certainly, there's no question about the commitment that this group has to sit down and continue the work that started yesterday at the audit meeting and the walk that was taken. You guys weathered this weather that we have here with us. Let me just, on behalf of the mayor, welcome all of you and assure you that the mayor's commitment is unwavering to continue to work with all of you, and as Dave said, to do that in a cooperative, collaborative way. We get things done when we all talk to each other and when we agree on what plans we have to move forward. We have a great opportunity to do the 3 Ps that Mark talks about if we begin now and we stay at it. Because we've got, especially in the Route 34 area, there's a lot of land that the mayor is committed to talk to the neighborhood and others about how we develop that. So I look forward to staying here a little longer today. I still have to do other things, but yesterday I had to leave right away, and I was not able to go out on the walk. So I'm anxious to hear what happened at that walk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tomas. Boy, did we have a great experience last night. We have a special treat in store for you this morning. Today, Mr. Mark Fenton is with us to talk about stickiness. He's going to talk about how we can bring lasting change for our community. Mark is a graduate of MIT, a 2-time Olympian, has hosted America's Walking Show on PBS. He's a published author in many areas, including exercise science, physical activity, walking, cycling, and pedestrian safety. He's a sought-after expert to talk about the areas of public health, planning, transportation, and serves as a professor at the Tufts University Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. So there are all the accolades and the academics, but I want to share with you that I've had the great pleasure of hearing Mark, and he has inspired and educated me about ways in which we can bring lasting change to our communities. So with that, why don't I ask you to join me in welcoming Mr. Mark Fenton to our group this morning.
That was very kind, and you didn't even mention my jail time, which is, I think, makes me feel far more credible, so I appreciate that a lot. It's a pleasure to join you all, and thank you for coming out in the rain. Although, I've got to tell you, I'm not going to give you guys any more props than the folks last night. This is our gang at the Career High School. We had a meeting, and you know, all you had to do was drive through the rain and then come into a nice warm breakfast. We actually walked for an hour last night around that neighborhood, and without complaint, people were happy to stay. I didn't hear anybody on our walk saying, oh, it's getting cold, let's go inside. No, they wanted to, let's walk down the next block. Let's talk about the next section of sidewalk or street or whatever. Now, having said that, they put a lot of challenges out there, and I am impressed by the caliber of the conversation that I hear happening in New Haven. So I've been online looking at, for example, the process you've been going through in updating your comprehensive plan. I've looked at that 34 West plan, or what happened already on the 34 East phase. So I've got a real sense of the sophistication level, but let me just tell you, the citizen advocates that come out for an event like last night impressed me perhaps most of all for the caliber of their thoughts. And so I commend the city, and I commend to you listening to them. Make sure you use them as a resource. I was really, really impressed. Some of you, by the way, I'm talking in the third person. You're here, so thank you very much. So having said that, I'm warning everybody. I'm getting older now. There's a lot more gray in my mustache than there used to be, and so I'm kind of getting frustrated with retelling this story again and again around the country. I've been lucky enough to be working with the Y nationally for over a decade, and now I'm just warning people right from the get-go. Plan to squirm uncomfortably a little bit during my comments. My intent is not to have everybody walk out here saying, great, we're on the contrary. I want everybody to say, holy cow, we have a major undertaking in front of us, because we do. And I mean we as a society, not we, just you here in New Haven, we as a society. So having said that, I'm going to summarize my basic story for those of you that just came for the breakfast and are going to sneak out, Tomas. Right. I'm just kidding, I'm kidding. I understand what your agenda is like. But having said that, here's the short version of the story. Number one, from a public health perspective, since it is the Y, it's CARE that's sort of starting this conversation specifically today, let me remind you that that's how I come to this as well. Although I studied engineering, my background, I worked a lot in exercise science at places like the Olympic Training Center and even at Reebok's Human Performance Lab. So I've been talking about exercise and how it's good for us for a long time. And that's the starting point of the story. We know everybody should be more physically active. There's great public health benefit for that. Sadly, we also know they are not. And we know that simply telling people to exercise has not worked. And I know that because I've been in this for 25 years, and that's what we've been doing for the bulk of those 25 years. Encouraging people to get out and exercise, go to the gym, get a membership, work out, walk. To no avail. To no avail. Interestingly enough, we've also learned in that couple of decades that how we build our cities and towns has much to do with how physically active people are. In other words, environmental influences are very, very strong on health behaviors. And furthermore, we've come to realize that if we build places for public health, we get what we call the triple bottom line. And that triple bottom line is often referred to as people, prosperity, and planet. But it's this. It's that we not only get a healthier population, but we also have a healthier, more robust economy and a more sustainable environment. The same principles I would use to help people walk and bike regularly will also tend to reduce motor vehicle traffic and clean air quality, reduce congestion, and help streets be more healthy and robust, and the businesses on those streets. So it's a really interesting triple bottom line that we're now starting to talk about in the world of healthy community design. But having said that, I'm going to make you do an exercise that we did last night because I find it again and again it's effective in putting some perspective on this. So here's what I want everybody in the room to do. I want you to take a moment. Actually, close your eyes. I literally want you to close your eyes right now. And I want you to picture yourself as young a child as you can remember being physically active in some way. Okay, so actually picture where you were and who you were with. Try to find a fond recollection of physical activity from your youth. Go back as far as your memory tapes will take you. Think about who you were with, where you were, what the physical environment was, and what you were doing. Okay, as soon as you have that image, you can open your eyes, turn to the person next to you, share those recollections right now. Just exit 10 seconds each, share those recollections. All right, so I want to make an observation. Did you hear the energy level in the room just ramp up? If I let you go, we keep going. I've done this, right? We've done this exercise where we actually let people work on it for a while, share ideas, and kind of collect. Happened last night too, didn't it? Right? People immediately get engaged. Their energy level. I see people get physical. They start acting stuff out. They're climbing trees and they're talking about riding their bikes and where they did it and what they did. So I'm going to ask a series of questions about these for those of you that haven't done this with me before. Just listen to these questions, all right? And raise your hand if your answer is affirmative regarding your recollections. How many of you largely recalled activities that occurred at a scheduled time and place? How many thought about things where you had to have an adult present? How many thought about things where you were only with kids of the same age and gender as you? How many thought about things where you needed a uniform? How many thought about things where you had to have an umpire or a referee? How many thought about things where you were with kids of different ages and different genders? So it might have been older and younger kids playing together, boys and girls, right? Whatever you could get your hands on to get a team up or something like that. How many thought about things where there wasn't necessarily an adult? Okay, this is an important one. How many recalled things you probably could not have gotten away with if an adult had actually been there? And how many of you are now elected officials? public servants of some sort with this malfeasance in your background. How many remember activities that involved a wheeled vehicle of some sort? So we talked about your big wheel last night, a scooter, skateboard, bicycle, tricycle, something with wheels. Are the old roller skates with the key? Did anybody have one of those? How many remember water being part of your recollection? So swimming in it, or playing at the beach, or maybe just playing in a neighborhood creek or pond or water fountain or fire hydrant. All right, so the question goes to this. At the heart of it, how many of you remember to some degree or another having been a free-range kid? Sort of a free-range kid. So you could disappear on a Saturday morning and be told to get home at a certain time or come home. Last two questions, and I want your hands up for these. How many believe the majority of kids today are free-range kids? Majority of America's youth. Or New Haven's youth. Free-range kids. Not so much, huh? Last question. How many think it's good for their health that we're raising a robust generation by not having them free-range? Good thing we don't have free-range kids anymore. So let's make sure we're very clear on what we've said. As recently as a generation or two ago, we are not that old in here. Average age of the women in here looks to be about 29, I think. Is that right? So really though, we're talking one or two generations. We had a lot of free-range kids. We agree they are not now, and we further agree it's not good for them, to which I ask this simple question to everybody I talk to around the country. What specifically are you doing about it? And if your answer is nothing, start squirming uncomfortably now, because I believe it is one of the greatest public health crises we face in this country. Right now, the fact that we don't let kids be free range has massive implications. Now, when we ask people, lots of people are writing about this. Guy named Richard Louv, by the way, wrote a great book called Last Child in the Woods. And it's not just about rural dwelling kids. He talks about urban kids. You know, there was that neighborhood lot they could go play at, or the street they would take over for street ball. Why don't people let their kids be free range anymore? What do they tell us? If we say, why can't you let your kid walk to school like Mark Fenton walked to school all the time when he was a kid? Now the answer might be school's too far away because we've consolidated a lot, but what's the first thing parents say? Why can't they take off on a Saturday morning? Not safe. The scary men with the big thick mustaches are hiding behind every tree, right? The mustache men are out there. And my question to you is, what's the actual increase in violent crime against kids by the unknown assailant over the last 30 or 40 years? Let's pick the time span in which the percentage of kids walking and biking to school went from 40% to only about 15%, and the percentage being driven by car, not by bus, by car, individual car, went from about 15% to almost half. That's a dramatic reversal. 30 years. In that 30-year time span, what's the actual change in violent crime against kids by the unknown assailant? He said minus 20. By the way, another interesting thing happened over that 30-year time span. Do you know what it is? Childhood obesity rates tripled. The exact same 3 decades, you guys. Overlay the data as we got in the habits of putting our kids in the car for everything they did, including going to soccer or a play date. When they were going to be physically active, they were driven, not riding their bikes like every one of you recall doing, or walking, right? That was the stories I was hearing at the table, and I hear all over the country. This is what we did to them. This is what we did, is we changed their transportation norms. We wouldn't call it that, but that's exactly what it is, right? And by the way, it's actually, of course, the change in violent crime against kids by the unknown assailant is, you know the answer, so say it out loud, 0. No increase. What it is the media covers it differently. And I'm not saying there aren't unsafe streets. Indeed, you know, there's a lot of interesting thought about this. This is a special issue of Time magazine that explored this whole question of sort of the overprotective parent and not teaching our kids the skills to be on the street, so then we become more worried about them. And furthermore, the fact that we've abandoned our streets. If you or I aren't walking on there, then my neighbor doesn't feel the streets as safe, right? So how can I let my kid walk there? I don't know the people who are out there. I'm not out there myself. But the reality is, if you want to talk about the great risks that our kids face, it's the fact that we're estimating, Centers for Disease Control tells us, 1 in 3 kids born today will have type 2 diabetes in their lifetime. Be clear, this is a disease that clinicians used to call adult onset diabetes. That was actually the term we used, adult onset, because we thought you got it in your 40s, 50s, and beyond. We can't use that term anymore because 9-year-olds get it. Elementary school nurses have to be trained to take blood glucose measurements because they may well have a number of kids in their school who are taking diabetes meds. We didn't think this was physiologically possible 20 years ago. Right? That's how dramatic and abrupt the change is. To be clear on this, one of my little campaigns is to change the conversation. Because of my experience around the country is everybody's talking about obesity epidemic, and they're missing these underlying behaviors. The underlying behaviors that are really driving this physical inactivity and poor nutrition. Those are the two risk factors. That's what leads you down this path to increased chronic disease rates like type 2 diabetes. And, by the way, driving the bus on healthcare costs in this country. You ask hospital administrators, some of you here know this story already, 70-80% of your beds, maybe more, are filled with chronic care of diseases associated with unhealthy lifestyles, based largely on three risk factors: tobacco, physical inactivity, poor nutrition. Those are the big three. That's what it's about. We will talk only about one today because I have sort of a unique perspective on this, and unfortunately you let the cat out of the bag on this. I did the weirdest of all events in track and field, and I studied exercise science and sports and so on. And we actually have photographic evidence that I was a competitive race walker. Here it is, ladies and gentlemen. It's a very long time ago, obviously. As is, you can tell how long ago this is because we only had black and white photography back then. That's all they had. And the other giveaway is that those shorts were in style when I was competing in the 1920 national championships. That's what this is. Many people will ask, why did you choose to be a race walker, Fenton, of all the weird sports you might have tried? And it's obvious when I show you the next slide. It's, of course, the huge crowds that show up at a competition. If you look very closely, now this is the start of the 1984 Olympic trials in the 50-kilometer race walk. You'll remember LA hosted the 84 games. So that's the LA Coliseum. The trials were in June that year. Very hot out, so they start you at 6 in the morning. And we finished at about 10. So you come into the stadium and it's packed. There are other people. It was very exciting. But at 6 a.m. when we started, and then they do it like the marathon, by the way. You start on the stadium track, then you go out and do a loop in the city, and then you come back in and finish on the track. But at 6 in the morning, you can't actually see my mom and dad right over there. I'm not making that up. That's really was them. So I come from this background of studying exercise, and I lived through the running boom, and then the aerobics boom, and then the tennis boom. You remember after Chrissy Everett, we were all going to play tennis, and we've had all these. People have all this stuff in their closets: cross-country skis and Nordic track machines. But the bottom line, I'll boil all of that down to three numbers. So if you want the public health story around physical activity, here it is: 30, 20, and 365. 30 is the minutes per day we're told we should be physically active to reduce our risk for cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, osteoporosis, clinical depression, dementia in old age, a growing list of cancers. In other words, every time another epidemiological study comes out, it confirms the protective value of moderate daily physical activity. We know kids benefit from more, and we know more and more as we look at this that it doesn't even have to be structured exercise. The person who walks a half an hour a day as part of their daily tasks, half an hour, to and from the bus stop, for example, will gain this benefit. You don't have to go to a gym, take a class to do this. That's the good news. The bad news is fewer than 20% of Americans actually meet this number. Indeed, Centers for Disease Control will tell you tired, but if they look at actual objective data, when they put monitors on somebody's hip and say, wear this for a week or two and measure your physical activity, we find that probably 1 in 10 Americans at most actually even hit this goal of 30 minutes a day. Many people, by the way, when they reported about themselves, have a much higher level. That's because we confuse being busy, which we all are, with being physically active, which we all are not, frankly, to be honest, right? Because much of what we do that's busy is behind a computer screen, on a telephone, behind a steering wheel, but we're not actually burning calories. We're not being physically active. Nor do we have to stay alive anymore. We don't have to hunt and gather. We don't have to work a field. That's a dramatic and short-term change. It's really only in the last century that the vast majority of the population doesn't have to be physically active in developed countries to stay alive. So what's the result of this, by the way? Not 365 days a year, sadly, 365,000 premature deaths a year, attributable to physical inactivity and poor nutrition. And why that's striking is the only thing that kills us, more of us prematurely, is tobacco. It's something like 450,000 deaths per year. And the interesting thing is it looks like tobacco deaths are plateauing as we're beginning to actually constrain tobacco use. I'm not saying we've won that battle, but we're not increasing our rate of tobacco consumption in society anymore. We're really working on secondhand smoke and things like that. Meanwhile, physical inactivity and poor nutrition, those numbers continue to trend upward. This is really distressing for somebody who's been working in physical activity and nutrition for the last 20 years. It says, whatever we've been doing is not working, right? That's the very clear takeaway. Why? This is what I call the stickiness problem. I'm just going to show you one study here, and this will be the end of it, but I could show you many. I could exhaust you with an hour-long talk that basically says this: telling people exercise doesn't work. This is a nice exercise intervention study over an 18-month period over which the first 6 months they called people on the phones. It was a walking program, by the way. To be very clear, all they were trying to do was get people to go out for about a 40-minute walk every day. Indeed, some people in the study were told you can break it into 4 10-minute walks. A third group in the study was even given a treadmill. That is, they put a treadmill in your house, and they say, find 4 times today to jump on the treadmill for 10 minutes. They made it as easy as possible. Then they called them on the phone and sent them email reminders, sent them an exercise diary, taught them how to warm up before and how to stretch so they didn't get injured, how to get a good walking shoe. Sent them an email. You had an exercise diary. If you filled it out and turned it in, you got prizes like t-shirts and water bottles. Because that's what we do in health promotion. We give out t-shirts and water bottles, right? My friends, how many, we were talking about this, how many t-shirts have I given away in my lifetime? Because it works. Over the 6 months of the intervention study, you'll notice all 3 groups increase their exercise minutes per week. Here's the problem. Once we stop calling you on the phone and giving you t-shirts and water bottles and up in your face, life takes over again. And the world you live in takes over again. You've still got crummy sidewalks out in front of your house, or you've still got to drive your kids to and from school, or you've still got all those other things that take the time away, and it drops off. It does not stick. This is what I allude to, this is what we were alluding to when we talked about the stickiness problem. We've got to find a way to take the good behaviors that we can teach you through great programming, the first P, programming, and then keep it rather than letting it drop off. And that's where the other 2 Ps come in. Because it can't just be a program. We actually need physical infrastructure, the projects, the second P, that builds a world that is stickier, and indeed the third P, the policies that reward that. And only when we do all 3, the initial program to get you to change behavior, then the project and the policies to get it to stick, will we have success. I'm not making this up. Just to be clear, like, well, what's this guy get off saying? How does he know? Turns out behavioral psychologists study this all the time, and we've been looking very closely at this, and we have lots of experience in public health. And we know you can't just talk to the individual. That's the tip of the iceberg, if you will. But the socio-ecological approach, as it is called, really requires that you actually operate at a bunch of levels. So we have all the influence in your daily life steering you toward this healthier behavior, right? So it's family and friends, it's your school or your workplace, your healthcare provider. Sound familiar? How about the community by its actual physical design and public policy all steer you in that direction? And would you not agree with me? We've got plenty of examples where we've done this in modern American society. In improved public health. The most well-known, when we talked about, I've alluded to it already, is certainly tobacco use, right? Where we don't just say don't smoke, it's bad for you. We make it hard to smoke in public places. I'm sure this is a smoke-free building, right? Is it? Yes. Right? And please tell me it is. We're making it so right now today, at least. Cigars. He's saying cigar smoking in our tweed jackets. Okay. So, but you would agree, my kids, when I was a competitive athlete, I'd get on an airplane and have to ask for a non-smoking seat. You remember what a seat in the non-smoking section meant? I was in front of the imaginary line, right? Behind that, there were people. I was smoking secondhand smoke all the way to the national championships in track and field, right? My kids will never be exposed to that, not because when we get on planes we say, hey, there's some young people on the plane today, be okay if everybody doesn't smoke. It's because it's the rule, indeed it's the law, right? And if you mess around with the smoke detector in that bathroom, they can land the plane and have the state troopers drag you off. In other words, we've taken it that seriously. We say public health trumps the individual desire, right, or need, addiction to smoke. But you could say the same about seatbelts and child safety restraints. You can say it about recycling. We're changing the environment. I can't walk through an airport now that there isn't a recycling bin next to every trash can. And I would go so far to tell you that, remind you that one of the greatest successes in public health of the last century is around water quality in the United States. You know, Haiti still at this moment has a hot cholera epidemic. Like literally, people are still coming down with it. And it is largely because they don't have a meaningful sanitation system, water sanitation system, right? And they haven't been able to build that infrastructure. Now, I served 6 years on my local planning board, was even the chair for a while. If a developer came into us after after the economic downturn and wanted to, it's a small house. We're going to do a 20-house subdivision, Mark. And because we're coming out of the downturn, money's a little tight, the dollars are really, I mean, I know it's in the ordinance and we're supposed to do it, but to save money and to get the economy ramped up, we're going to go with open pit toilets behind the houses. We're not going to hook up to the septic system. We're not going to hook up to sewer. What would my plan commission say? I hope. And what would New Haven say? I hope. Right? No, we have ordinances, we have requirements. You're going to meet those requirements, and public health necessitates that. Same developer comes to me and says, Mark, we know that it's in the ordinance and everything, but we're sort of on this quiet country road outside of Situate, Massachusetts, and frankly, so what we'd like is to grant us a waiver on the sidewalk requirement. We don't want to have to connect to that bike trail. I know the bike trail is only a quarter mile away, and the ordinance says we're obliged to connect, but we'd like a waiver on that. What do we do all over the United States all the time? Green light, go right ahead, because we got to get that economic development. We got to get the engine running here. I submit to you it is no different. That if we say yes to the no sidewalk connection, or not putting in the bike facility, or not connecting to the trail, we might as well say, and go ahead with the open pit toilets out back. Sure, the cholera will happen tomorrow, the cardiovascular disease will happen in a decade, but that's what we're doing to those kids. If they can't be free-range kids, if we design a neighborhood that exacerbates the stickiness problem that we talked about a moment ago. Let's be crystal clear about that. Just the same, just a different time scale. So, yes, we need these classic exercise facilities and programs. They are necessary and important part of success. They're not sufficient. For success, we've got to build a world where these are the normal pictures, where being physically active is a part of daily life. Yes, on a 20-degree day yesterday, those were all photos taken here. I saw tons of pedestrians. We were over at the Stop and Shop over in the Dwight neighborhood. We hung out outside the bus long enough for our fingertips to start to go numb, right? And just in that 5 or 10 minutes, bicyclist, pedestrian, transit rider, bus pulls up, more people get off, more people get on. All sorts of people not driving their cars to that Stop and Shop. Does everybody know the one I'm talking about? Yeah, you know right where I am. If you do this, stand out there and just watch how much pedestrian, bicycle, and transit traffic there is. Just at that one location as a case study. Okay, smarty pants, fast talking guy. This is a question I always get, and I should. Is there any evidence that you can build such places? If we build it, will they come? Can you create environments for those people? Short answer is yes. Only slightly longer answer is, as I read the research literature, basically 4 things characterize these settings. And indeed, I thought of this when I served on my planning board as a mental checklist that sort of anytime we were permitting a project, I wanted to be improving each of these 4 things. A greater mix of land uses in proximity, so different kinds of destinations pulled together. A good connected network, so if I was moving between those destinations, I had a bike or a walk or a transit option. Third, when I get to the destination, it was designed to reward me rather than punish me for showing up without a car. Think about that. Think about how much we design in America that says, show up with your car. If you show up by one of the other modes, well, we'll find a way to get you in. But really, you should show up by car. That's what it's designed for. And last but not least, it's safe and it's accessible for everybody in the community, including all ages, all income levels, all physical abilities and disabilities. Somebody in a wheelchair, somebody pushing a stroller, pulling a grocery cart, walking with a walker. Got it? Those 4 things. You read this research literature. I hate to oversimplify it, but really that's it. Those 4 things characterize these settings. Anything else you talk to me about, I guarantee we can put it in one of those 4 piles. And we have examples from all over New Haven. In other words, all the photos you're seeing are from here, illustrating these very things. It's not like we have to go to Boulder, Colorado, or Portland, Oregon to see it. We don't, or San Jose, right? We got it here. You're doing much of it. So if you think about the land use piece of this, that's historically what your neighborhoods were. I was really struck by how much New Haven, at least portions of it, is a city of neighborhoods. And you can see, if not still active neighborhood cores, the remnants of that. The little bodegas and neighborhood markets all over the place, but clusters built around a church, a playground, or even sometimes a small open space like this little Monitor Square Park. It's not a large green space, but it serves that neighborhood. Compact housing, not giant yards, not the suburban style model. Things like neighborhood schools and library branches and post offices, neighborhood stores. All of those things are mix of uses, right? And the more proximate they are, the more likely I can walk between those. Second is the network of facilities. So I can have the library branch nearby, but if there's no sidewalk to get there, I'm not going to walk, right? If I feel like I'm taking my life in my hands. So the system is really quite broad. Certainly it's sidewalks, but it's well-to-use pathways and trails like your Farmington Canal Greenway Trail, but it's on-street facilities like bike lanes and sharrows and transit. It's really important to recognize transit as a piece of the system because there are a growing number of studies that tell us regular transit riders are more likely to get the 30 minutes of physical activity a day, not consciously, just as built into their daily travel, and that tends to be particularly beneficial to lower-income residents who are more likely to be regular transit riders. So that's important because if you think about where are the highest risks for cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, where are the risk factors at? Also, our lowest income residents, right? So that aligns nicely. Create a great transit system, and you're actually adding, to my mind, a public health asset. I really sincerely believe that. And if you look around the country, just a quick side note on this, at the cities and towns that are being successful in increasing their non-motorized travel share, in other words, the amount of trips that happen not by car, walkway, transit is there. It's an important part of the system, right? Because it's the linchpin for the longer trip or for the day where it starts out clear, but later it's snowing. I rode my bike, on my way home, I throw my bike on the bus and I go home, right? I mean, it's the system, it knits the system together. I mentioned bikes because there's a really interesting debate evolving around the country around the real bike wonks around this. There were some that said, if we just strike bike lanes and put in sharrows, we're good. But as you start to think about the pantheon of potential bicyclists, you recognize that there's an entire sector of people who will bicycle on more protected facilities, like multi-use pathways and trails, or protected bike lanes, who would not be comfortable out on a sharrow lane. So as we think about expanding the universe of potential bicyclists and getting into the world of the not as serious, not as skilled, not as self-confident cyclists, if that's a long-term goal, then we have to think about making sure that the network includes some of these other kinds of facilities. The data is really kind of compelling on that, particularly on a couple of studies that have just come out in the last 2 or 3 years. So we have to think about that. I also want to mention, this is a picture of a trail out in Sacramento called the American River Trail. You've probably been on it when you worked out there. Beautiful trail. Like, I think it goes 30 miles out to the Folsom Reservoir, 20 plus anyway. But from right downtown, it starts and ends. I mean, one terminus is downtown, Old Town Sacramento. Interestingly enough, the last 2 miles, right near their transit center and everything, the last 2 miles to that transit center were the hardest two to finish because they were downtown in the urban core. Land was hard to get. No, seriously, the stuff out along the rivers, you got more remote, more suburban, was easier to get. It was really hard to get the right of way. They ended up doing parts of it. Look at that. It's not a very glamorous picture. There are gorgeous sections of the trail. Yeah, here I show you a piece that's underneath an elevated expressway track. Why are you showing that one, Mark? It's the most important 2 miles of the trail. You tell me why. Why is that? Those last 2 miles, it actually connects to destination. It's the one that guy can ride to work every day. This is not a guy who rode his bike to a trailhead on a Saturday morning, took his bike, his $4,000 bike off his fancy car, and said, $200 worth of life. I love those guys. They're great. Go ride. Do it. But this guy has panniers. He's riding to work. Now, there are people who would say, why did we spend the money for that really expensive right-of-way? It was really hard. It was costly to build that. We had to deal with easements and the trail company and CSX. Oh, my God, look at those guys. And all of that, right? We'd say, I would never walk there. I never ride my bike. To which I say, and I'm true, I do a lot of public meetings, and I would say, I don't care whether you ever walk or ride a bike. Because if this guy does, he's one less car on the highway. He's one less car you're competing with downtown for a parking space. He is reducing his greenhouse gas footprint for you. And because you happen to be pooled in your life insurance with him, he doesn't have a heart attack because he's physically active every day. Your life insurance rate, your health insurance rates go down. I don't care whether you ever ride it. Shut up. If he does, you win. I'm quite serious. Oh, and by the way, if your house is anywhere near this trail, its value goes up. We know all of that from the research. So I'd never let anybody tell you, well, I wouldn't walk. Who would walk to that store? Who would use this side? Doesn't matter if you would. Because they'll say that. I would never walk there. It doesn't matter. If anybody does, we all collectively benefit. We need to be unapologetic about this stuff. I'm quite serious. All right, so that's my guy right there. Because a bunch of other people benefit from him not being on that highway, him not parking downtown, all sorts of things. Third, when I get to my destination, what's it look like? Does it say, top picture, show up by car, because we got lots of parking. Half of it's empty most of the time. I mean, they just did a study. There's a guy collecting photos, this is true, of Black Friday parking lots. Did you see that website? Mind-boggling. Half-empty parking lots. All these malls and retail settings where we say, oh yeah, but we need this parking for the really busy days of the year. Okay, here it is, Black Friday, half-empty parking lots. We have overparked so much of the retail in our country, it's mind-boggling. Or we can do this, And you don't have to be a landscape architect or planner to tell us when we do visual preference surveys what people think is more walkable, more bikeable, what they're more likely to do that behavior. But let's be clear, there are studies that actually catalog it. Building up at the street versus setback, street trees, awnings, benches, which I do not accept are amenities. They are in fact functional attributes. A bike rack is a functional attribute for a bicyclist. Right? All of these things have to be there if we're going to expect it. Now, I always show this picture of Portland, Oregon's lovely Walgreens, the one in the near the convention center neighborhood there. Up at the corner, the small parking lot is behind it. It's visually screened. There's a wonderful bike rack. There's a great transit access point. In fact, the benches alongside the building serve transit stuff. And everybody says, yeah, that's fine, that's Portland. But as we talked about last night, everybody knows Portland is a socialist enclave. Right? Bunch of socialists live out there and they do this stuff. You come to the United States of America, like Fairfield, Connecticut, or here, or wherever, and you get the standard Walgreens because that's their standard template. They want the corner parcel, they want the building setback, they want all the parking out front. And, that argument used to hold water. By the way, I mentioned bike parking. This is some of your on-street, sort of in the curb extension parking. Are you still doing this? Have those been taken out, or are they still
For
there?
the winter, just for the winter.
So they come out, but then they go back out for the
Free for the spring.
Good. And 3 is good. small starting number, which God, if we only had the parking guy in here, if we could talk to the guy about parking, about turning over car parking spaces to bike parking, how could we reach him? Could we talk to him about it?
He's on Twitter.
Okay. So here's my point. You don't have to go to the communist enclaves, right? This is Neenah, Wisconsin, which is a non-communist enclave, middle of Wisconsin, so Paul Ryan country, right out in the heart of the state, not Madison, where all the communists live up there. And they got the standard Walgreens when they came in. But Appleton, Wisconsin, next town over, also not a communist enclave, got that one. And that building is up at the street, and there's sort of the pedestrian orientation. There's a bike rack on the side, much smaller parking area. And, one way to get this is to actually build those requirements into ordinance. I can't see this strongly enough. You're just doing the comp plan update. It says a lot of the right words. Now, the question is, will it be reflected in ordinance? Because if it only stays in the plan, and the ordinance and zoning don't reflect it, forget about it. If the roadway design guidelines don't say this is what we want, forget about it. It's got to be built into the ordinance. That's the first step. But even once it's in ordinance, it can be waived. I know that, because on my planning commission, we would waive sidewalk requirements. They're there, and I would lose a vote 4-1, as the developer said, well, it's on a cul-de-sac dead-end road, and the road that it's on doesn't have a sidewalk on it, so why should we build them here? And I would make the argument, well, long-term we're going to have that, doesn't matter, right? Well, they would say, we can't put that burden on it. So here's my point. We've got to support the elected and appointed officials and the staff who make the recommendations, so that when they say, no, make the requirement, bring the building up to the street, require the bicycle parking, build it into the ordinance. Do you guys have a bike parking requirement actually built into ordinance? In other words, you have parking requirements. Is the bike park piece of that now? So wait a minute. That was a fairly equivocal answer.
Some zones.
Some zones. Okay, so.
And it's always an option to replace.
Yeah, options. So here's where I come down on options. I'm with you. No, I'm with you. I understand. Let me just throw out this challenge to you. Cities around the country that are making the turn on this stuff go from option to requirement, and then they up the reward goes for give me covered and secure. Put it on take away 3 parking spaces inside the building and make a parking corral. What was the building? Oh, at the community college. So over the community college, they've got interior bike parking, right? And by the way, it's really visible as you're pulling in to pay for your parking. There's the free bike parking on both sides. It's a nice messaging. I like that about it. It's like, you could be parking for free if you only bring it in 2 wheels.
It's free parking.
Oh, the car parking is free?
State college.
We'll have another conversation about that later. We will, shortly. 4th, it's got to be safe and accessible. So I can have all of this, but if I feel like I'm going to get run over getting there, then it's not going to suffice. So these kinds of tools, curb extensions and roundabouts and mid-block crossings. Okay, geek testing number 101. Why would I make the pedestrian going through the median island here angle to the right? Why wouldn't I let her just walk straight across? Why is that designed in it? It's not because where the landing is on either side of the street. That's an intentional design element where they offset and make the pedestrian go to an angle through the island. Who can tell me why you would do that? Somebody who's not a traffic engineer. Okay, go. Yeah, go for it. Tell us. What? Yeah, you're making her look toward the oncoming traffic in either direction that she walks through. Everybody get that? You're increasing the likelihood that she makes eye contact with the driver. Indeed, I like this in your schools in particular, where you have less experienced pedestrians, or in your senior centers, less attentive, where I'm actually by design helping the pedestrian connect with the driver and decide who's going to yield. So my point is only, the engineer's toolkit is actually full. I don't let engineers take the rap anymore. In fact, it is the engineering world that realized that across the country, had been building these 4-lane roads thinking they would carry more traffic as volumes increased in a retail district. This is in Urbana, Illinois, near University of Illinois. And the head engineer there said they were having huge problems with left-turning collisions. So vehicles turning left, first lane yields to them, but the second one doesn't, you get a collision. Or when they stop to make that left turn, somebody either rear ends them or tries to go around, creates delays or even a collision in the right-hand lane. In other words, it's an inefficient and crash-laden model. So they actually studied it and went to this 3-lane design. So many people call these road dives, by the way. So it's reducing from 4 to 3, but really it's an increase from 4 to 5 because you now have room for 2 bike lanes, right? And the center turn lane, if you put in intermediate islands, you break it up, you make it safer, and you provide those pedestrian crossings with the offset that I just described. That's precisely what they did. And although a few store owners along that corridor at first screamed bloody murder, oh my gosh, this is going to kill our businesses, indeed what they've done is eliminated collisions, moved just as much traffic, and, wait for it, way better for bicyclists and pedestrians. But they did it largely for the motor vehicle traffic. Pretty nice way to go. Do you have any places you could do that here? I'm not so sure, but it certainly looked to me like there were a lot of roads with a lot of asphalt out there. And it's kind of the classic sort of platooning. You know, I could stand in the middle of the road between light cycles, and then of course there'd be a huge platoon of vehicles that would make it entirely untenable and loud. Even as we walked along 34W last night, we talked about that, the fact that, you know, a bolus of cars, a platoon of cars comes through and it's dauntingly loud and intimidating because they're all gunning to make that next green light, right? That's the nature of sequenced lights like that. But this is Derby Road way out west, sort of toward, I mean, I think the Yale facilities are out there, right? The athletic facilities and stuff. You know, but it begs the question, could that road get a dive? And I'm not saying that I turned to your engineering staff to actually analyze whether it would. But across the country, those kinds of roads, and then last night, people started throwing out places like Grosso Boulevard and Edgewood, and they said, you know, we got a lot of big, wide roads that if you're throwing out there the notion of doing this, we would like to suggest consideration of many of these. Which I think is, you know, that's where cities like you that are making this turn and really committing to this, that's where they're going. They're looking at all these roads through a different lens. By no means am I saying these are all right for it. What I'm saying is we should be asking that question routinely now. Do we have more lanes we need? Can we make the lanes work better? So, to summarize, 4 elements of healthy design. Mix of land uses, connected network, good site design, those details, building the street, you know, that stuff, the benches, the street trees, the lines, and safe and accessible. Right, so that's nice. What does that imply? And in particular, Mark, is there any reason that this isn't happening already? I mean, we are a free market society, after all, a capitalist society. The marketplace is supposed to bring the best ideas to the fore. Shouldn't the market be telling us this is what people want, if it's such a good idea, if it makes such more livable places? Here's my short answer to that. It already is. And I say this with great certainty. So, there's a really cool study, one of now many, that uses a website called WalkScore. Anybody know, who here has seen the WalkScore website? Oh, you guys should all write this down. In fact, I give you permission to pull your things out and put in your address. It gives you a number, any address in the United States, a number, actually North America, works up in Canada too. From 0, it will give a score from 0 to 100 of the walkability based only on the first of my 4 vectors, which is sort of proximity of destinations. It doesn't talk about sidewalk quality, connectivity. But it's interesting because it asks the question, what's nearby, right? And what they found is just using that one, higher housing values in areas with higher walkability. To vastly simplify it, they compared same house in the same city, different, you know, but just different location. One has a high walk score, so same number of bedrooms, bathrooms, all the amenities, just one's walkable, one's less walkable. Higher housing values. Other studies have shown they sit on the market less time. Some other studies show from the downturn, you know, the recession, showed higher foreclosure rates in lower walkable, less transit-served areas. Right? That's a fairly consistent finding, that the places with good transit service, good walkability, lower foreclosure rates. The housing market held together better. This is a really big deal. By the way, I was intrigued to see, you have some really high walk score neighborhoods. Over in the Dwight neighborhood, on 92, in the Hill area where we were, 73. I mean, I can go to entire cities in the United States, San Antonio, Houston, where they get, you know, their highest numbers are 25 and 30. Because they were built in the automobile area, everything is spread out by zoning ordinance, right? The land uses were intentionally segregated. The gem, the bones you're working with here, that's the great blessing that you have. You're working with these great bones, right? You all know this, right? I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Say it with pride, you know, sort of be unabashed about it. But we're seeing again, this is back in 2012, USA Today was already on this. In other words, popular culture is even recognizing people are looking to move back into cities or towns. Walkable neighborhoods, they want stuff nearby. Quality transit, we're seeing this pop up again and again and again in both the popular literature and in the research that organizations do. So this 2010 document asks the question, what's the next generation of home buyers looking for? Proximity to a school, a park, a playground, access to a trail. This, by the way, look at the picture on the front. This is not a publication of the Sierra Club, folks. It's the National Association of Realtors, right? It's their annual survey of what customers want. The picture on the right, it's a girl on a bike with a baguette and sunflowers. My God, it looks like the Netherlands. No, seriously. And that's the National Association of Realtors in the United States, right? 20 years ago, the cover photo of the American Dream is a house on 3 acres with a 4-car garage, right? This is what they're saying, the American. We've got a bunch of millennials, and we got a bunch of older empty nesters, right? The boomers, who are saying, this is what I want now. We are undersupplied in the market with this, they will tell you, as does the Urban Land Institute. It is the dawn for the New Havens of the world. This is your moment. The market is out there. You're going to be building this for them, that's what this says. Let me go a step further. EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, has actually looked at the data in a number of studies, many studies. These are kind of white papers, compiled research that say two things. One, developers are interested in developing this kind of stuff because it's actually less costly. They're not rebuilding infrastructure. Now, if they're doing a project where there's already water and sewer, where you've already got utilities, where roads are already down, redevelopment is cheaper potentially than new greenfield development. That's sprawling, more compact development. Again, more for each parcel. Furthermore, the second study focuses on the economic success of those areas, and it says these places are the places that are thriving now. All right? So there's lots of research backing this up. Indeed, this is a compelling study. New York City. Remember the controversy when New York was just taking lanes out of places like Broadway and Times Square, and just putting paint down and throwing out street furniture? Does everybody remember how controversial that was? David Letterman had a field day with this when they first started doing it. So what are they doing? They're just putting chairs in the middle of Times Square, those idiots. Well, it's been hugely successful. And indeed, they've now done some research to compare streets that have had treatments versus not, bike lanes and protected bike lanes. And what do they find? I guarantee you the mayor was talking to de Blasio about this last night. You said she was down there in New York, right? They're talking about how these are now their most thriving streets. That's what the study tells you. These streets have higher retail revenue, which means, wait for it, higher tax revenue, thank you very much, and jobs associated with that. They are, by the way, also more livable neighborhood streets. This study specifically, now this is by one of the geek bike organizations, the Bike Walk Alliance and the Green Lane Project, but essentially they looked at the research where they've done these things like protected bicycle lanes like this one here, or the one I showed earlier, or trails, and what they're seeing again and again is there are real measurable economic benefits, such as we talked about before, supporting real estate values, that employees, as you build a skill-based economy, a technical economy, these are the kinds of cities those employees want to live in. Right? They say, I want access to a bike trail, I want to be able to get on a pathway. So if you want to retain those kinds of employees, you're building this stuff. And here's the coup de grace for me. This magazine is the publication of the National Association of Home Builders. The March 2014 issue's cover story is Walkability, Why We Care and You Should Too. Home builders, they do not care whether anybody gets 30 minutes of physical activity a day. They care that when they build a house, they sell it. That's what they care about, right? They're saying this is what sells. They do 6 different case studies from very rural environments to very urban. And in every case, they talk about what walkability means. Yes, it's different, but the bottom line is that's the thread. Do not tell me the market isn't ready for this and isn't giving us very clear messages. Okay, how do we get there? Home stretch. Okay, my hands fast talking guy. Is there a way forward? Are we doing the right stuff? Well, the short answer is I believe you are. I actually wrote this article for a special issue of the journal Childhood Obesity, which, by the way, I wish was titled Childhood Physical Activity and Nutrition, because remember, I'm trying to change the conversation. They really understand the 2 age. Having said that, they invited me. David Katz at Yale is one of the editor-in-chief there. And it was an invited review article, and I think they thought I was going to write about walking programs and, sort of more walking stuff in schools and things like that. They said, okay, because the question was, what do you know about the environmental sort of policy stuff? What's going to break the back of the childhood obesity epidemic in the United States? These are the 5 things I wrote about. I didn't talk about walking programs and PE in schools and stuff. I talked about land use planning and zoning ordinances. I talked about complete streets, trail networks for transportation, not just recreation, but building trails so you actually get places. Bike and transit infrastructure, or what the geeks among us would call transportation demand management, right? That whole field. And safe routes to school, which is really just a subset of transportation demand management, focused specifically on shifting kids' behavior. Well, let me just say, you're in the midst of, I would argue, all of this stuff to one degree or another. You're doing it. And the only thing I would say is ramp it up, get broad commitment, and make it policy level. Not one-offs, not a success here and a model there and a demonstration project there. You got to go to the next level. Use this comp plan update as an opportunity to do that. So have this comprehensive planning process lead into ordinances fully reflecting this, not as options, not incentive-based. This is the rule. No, and I don't mean to be wise. I didn't mean that sarcastically. But the point is, so if you want to do inclusionary, if you want affordable housing, you don't say, and we'll give you incentives. Yeah, incentives for the affordable housing are nice. You just say, this is how much affordable unit, what the percentage is going to be. You build it into the ordinance, then you get the number, right? And you work with developers to make sure the math works. I mean, I was considered, just to be very clear, I was considered a pro-development guy on my planning board, because I was always the one who said, let's go talk to the developers, learn what the math is, and then we'll say what the affordable component has to be, and what density bonus they get for it. So, as you do this, by the way, it was really interesting. I'm just looking online. One of your from last year, you guys were actually, as you were finishing this comp plan update, you were surveying and probably talking to the very kind of people who came to our workshop last night. I'm sure were the ones that responded to this. But look at the themes: neighborhood character, multimodal transportation. They talked again and again about walk, bike, transit. Transit comes up a lot through the materials that I found online. Traffic safety, traffic calming, neighborhood quality, quality of life. Placemaking. I didn't see that word necessarily a lot, but that's essentially what people were asking for. Make places, restore the neighborhood character that we've had so that these have all the energy that they once did. And my only point in showing you these two photos, that's a subway that's tucked into a mixed-use residential development, and this is a Barnes & Noble that would have gone out on the perimeter in Terre Haute, Indiana, okay, right next to the, the Home Depot and the Walmart, but they built into their zoning enough requirements and incentives and rewards that it ended up downtown, right next to the university, in a multi-story with retail on the first floor and housing and office space above. I mean, that's not where Barnes & Noble goes. Barnes & Noble's a big box store. It's on the big boxes out on the strip on the edge of town. Apparently not. And my only point in reminding you of this is it's a new day. The conversation with everybody, right on down to Walmart, is different. We're seeing these neighborhood Walmarts being put in, and parking lots don't have to be out front, and parking requirements are changing. I was really cool to see this, that over a third of your residents, their primary transportation mode, here's walk, bike, public transit, that's fully a third. And if you add, did you tell me? Car sharing, it gets up to almost half, 45%, that are not in a single occupancy vehicle. That's surprising for New Haven. I expect those kind of numbers from Minneapolis or Portland or Boston. So that's, really impressive that you're already at that point. Last night, needless to say, we were over in the Hill neighborhood, right, or at the Hill School, so kind of adjoining the Hill and the Dwight neighborhood and everything. And so a lot of talk on the 34W project, and themes that come through from the comp plan and show on the 34W planning documents that I found online, just reminding you sort of the notion of mixed to include residential, scaling so that you really connect to these surrounding neighborhoods. This corridor, again and again, I can show you the map. Almost every one of the maps that the folks last night drew on saw this as a greenway corridor connecting all the way out to the Grosso Boulevard. That's sort of the beginning of, and it could be the beginning of a major east-west connection. Or it could just be a really fast-moving road with a lot of development. It could go either way. So the details really matter. What happens now? Because if it's just about moving cars east and west, this will not be an asset to the community. But it could be a central spine. This could be an Olmstedian, and you've got the heritage, right? This could be an Olmstedian model. It really could. It could be phenomenal. Set that standard for yourselves. As you keep doing the parcels moving west, set that standard. I know people in this room are already thinking that, but I'm just reminding you, this is like legacy work for this generation in New Haven. This is the stuff that your kids will either be more likely to be free range or not, by virtue of how right you get stuff like this, right? Because if this isn't permeable, this just remains a divide between this part of the neighborhood and this, and we can't walk from here to that school, then we lose. It's a less free-range neighborhood, right? It does get down to that practicality. At a starting level, across the country, I'm seeing communities do this. Just change procedurally at the planning level. So Plan Commission no longer just requires for developers a traffic impact analysis. When the developer is doing that, everybody knows what that is, so when you're doing a new development, you have to have them estimate the number of car trips. A simple procedural change is to require a multimodal transportation analysis. Estimate the number of pedestrian, bike, and transit trips in the best case scenario. Not how many pedestrians do we see there now, which is a meaningless estimate, because if it's horrible conditions, then you're not going to see any pedestrians there. This procedural change, it's amazing. Most of the design and engineering firms out there can now do this. So if you just say, as part of your proposal, you've got to come in with all four modes. Talk to us about bike, ped, and transit trips. It's a procedural change, number one. Number two, this is important to know, the ITE, the Institute of Transportation Engineers, their most recent update to the Trip Generation Manual includes lots more stuff about bike, ped, and transit than any previous iteration of this document. Because they talk about TOD, transit-oriented development. They talk about urban development. So in other words, the engineers can't say to you, well, we can't estimate ped and bike trips. There's nothing on it. We've got stuff on that now. It's not perfect. Anybody who works in the field will tell you we need to collect better data. The Europeans are way ahead of us on this, but we're doing it. So, this is my geek engineer thing here. I can't say this strongly enough. Multimodal transportation analysis should be a matter of course. This could be a procedural change, I think, at a plan commission level. I don't think anybody even has to vote this. You just, as part of the checklist, say, we expect it. Is that fair, by the way? Who works with plan commission or in the planning department?
He's on the commission.
Okay. Does this sound plausible to you? Okay. Yeah, all right, it's your staff, okay. Well, you'd be the guy that's gonna end up going nose to nose with the developer on how do we do it, where do we find the data, and
In truth, in New Haven, that particular battle, I think, is largely won.
Good.
It's just a question of making it happen.
Codified.
actually, yeah, making it, yeah, good, all right, great. So in other words, there's acceptance certainly on this side, and now let's just make it the new normal. Good. By the way, we were down at Kimberly and Lambert in one of those little triangles, and the only point is, sort of, if I were doing an MMTA of this area, I might say, I really don't need this leg of the triangle here. So Doug and I were looking at that. That's the one right there. That's the CT, little CT market over there. Is anybody familiar with where we're talking about down in the Hill neighborhood? Okay. So anyway, the point is, you took that leg away and actually connected that, turned that into sort of a plaza, allowed seating out in front of that for the store there and stuff like that. Sometimes, that might be your example of some of the crazy stuff New York's doing with taking out a street, because I suspect you'd find, freezing cold again yesterday, we stood there and saw dozens of pedestrians and a handful of bicyclists, moving around that neighborhood center, that cluster right there. 2, complete streets. So, the state of Connecticut has adopted language around this, but I think it's fair to say, like many states across the country, we're not really sure how we're doing it, what we're doing. I think state DOT is still trying to find its way on this. I'm not trying to be unkind, but is that a fair representation? And I would submit that the premise, though, is pretty straightforward. Every time we touch a road, we think about all 4 modes: bike, ped, transit, and motor vehicle. And we don't just give the motor vehicle primacy. And my only thought in this is that you guys can model this and should be a state model. Why shouldn't New Haven be the place that's doing it best? So ideas like this one, this notion of a protected bike lane from Edgewood all the way toward downtown, I was really excited to see that when Doug took me out there yesterday. We were looking at that. I mean, it's a great candidate road for this. We're right out by the Edgewood School right here. This is an example of a protected bike lane. And the only reason I'm showing this is to remind you the physical infrastructure of it is fairly modest. In this case, it's striping and bollards, by the way, which I don't want to sort of sound crazy, that's all removable. If in 2 years you found this was a total disaster and literally the economy of New Haven died because of this protected bicycle lane, you could take it out. I trust that in fact what will happen is 2 years from now people will be begging for a half dozen more of them on other major corridors. Once we realize how unbelievably cool it is and how many more kids ride their bikes to the, I think, 4 schools that we saw along that corridor as we drove into Edgewood. Right? This is, it just strikes me, it's perfect. And by the way, when we start to do this, you say, but where's the evidence? Well, a great place is the NACTO, National Association of City Transportation Officials, Urban Bikeway Guide, which quite frankly, along with their Urban Design Guide, Street Design Guide, should be the manuals that the state adopts, and then you should adopt as your street design guidelines. They are very well vetted. They've been tested in cities like New Haven. In other words, you can't say, oh, but we're too big or we're too urban. These are models built for this kind of setting. I love treatments like this. This is called an advanced bike box. You guys know what that is?
Yep.
So there's a stop line for the cars, and then the bikes are allowed to go just beyond that, about a bicycle length, meaning when the light changes, the bicyclists take off. They're in full view of the cars, and in the first 2 or 3 seconds, a bike is accelerating as fast as the car. They're in and out of the intersection before the cars, if they even had a chance to turn left or right and run them over, right? By the way, car drivers tell us they like this better because they see the dang bike. They're not surprised by some bike coming out of their blind spot right here as they go to turn right. And they say, oh my God, I never see them. They feel horrible having hit that. Most of them do. There are a couple that would like to hit us. But for the most part, so my point is, this is an improvement for drivers as well as bicyclists. Everybody clear on that? All right, so those are the kinds of things that are in the guides. Here's the Urban Street Design Guide. And by the way, really fundamental premises from the transportation officials, from cities all over the country that you would want to emulate. If I gave you the list of cities, open the front of the book, you'd say, yeah, I like it, I live there, oh, happy to ride a bike there, I'd like to live there. Every one of those cities are the ones that really built these guidelines. So I just throw that out there as an opportunity. Having said that, we also have to reward the staff that we're asking to do this. And I am seeing across the country people actually begin to reevaluate what performance measures are for engineers and planners. So historically, we've measured the performance of a roadway by what's called level of service. And that's an A, B, C, D, E, F grade. How many people are here are familiar with this geeky stuff I'm talking about? Okay, so you should all know this. It turns out this is very important. It dictates an awful lot about what happens in your daily driving, walking, bicycling, transiting life. These grades dictate whether a project goes forward. If we're lowering the level of service at an intersection, we may well not do something for a pedestrian if it lowers the car level of service. Well, here's the big news. Across the country, cities and, wait for it, states are reevaluating whether level of service should be the gold standard. The state of California has passed legislation, yes, I know, communist enclave, an entire state, but it really isn't anymore. It really isn't. And even out there, their state legislature said level of service can no longer be the benchmark measure of roadway performance. They are now coming up with alternatives like vehicle miles traveled, or maximizing bicycle and pedestrian trips, or in transit trips. In other words, alternatives to just saying make it work for the car. Just want to be really clear. You're not alone. So an intersection like this, which could be considered wacky, oh my God, this looks like it's more for the pedestrian than the motor vehicle, I would say, wow, what an amazing pedestrian and bicycle level of service at that intersection. And by the way, not a bad one for cars too, because pedestrians are very visible, I'm not getting surprised, right? That's Whitney and Audubon, right? So you know, that's what I believe that's a new day. Here's a really interesting intersection that came up a number of times in the community workshop last night. People talked about that intersection out at Derby. It's really, we're out by the Barnard School, the environmental school. The environmental center is across the street there. There's the overpass, but only the students can use it, my understanding is. So everybody else has to cross at grade. Plus, you've got the Yale facilities out there. I mean, this is pretty... This is one of those places that you guys, and this is Grosser Boulevard, right, just to be clear, where you could go for the wild change. Right? Like, could this be, if we did a road diet on Grosso, could this become a modern 21st century high volume roundabout? And the answer is yeah. I mean, I've seen that happen in places all over the country. Now, whether you guys would really be willing to try it, don't know. But I challenge you to. I challenge you to, because it's the kind of intersection that places around the country are reevaluating through this lens, through this health lens. By the way, it's not like you aren't doing roundabouts. I saw 3 different styles of roundabout, and those are just in the couple of places we were able to visit. You know, a textured only, raised one, mountable curb. You were asking me about mountable curbs. This is a really nice example from Madison, Wisconsin. They worry about snow plowing there, so I can show you more of these kinds of pictures, but it's a full 6-inch rise, but it's a softened rise, so it deters cars, but the biggest fire truck in the fleet can blow right over it if he has to. So they've found that balance, and they're designing in a way that maintains public safety, but deters the driver's behavior. So I just wanted to offer. But at the other end of the spectrum, unless we think everything is a gazillion-dollar project, you're thinking Grosso and that intersection, oh my God, that's got to be on the 20-year time horizon. We have to do a Tiger grant. We have to do a major. So what can we do with simple treatments? So we were over at Monitor Square there at the little triangle. And we were talking about this is all usable space. This is all striped off. Cars aren't supposed to be there, right? That's the end where Derby breaks off to the left. Everybody got where we are? All right, now you could do stuff. We talked with the folks from the neighborhood when we were walking there, and they said, well, we could do a festival here. You know, you could set up, you could put food carts out here, or set up a stage, a temporary stage, and do a music festival here, and expand by half again, at least the size of the triangle there. But one of the problems was the very crosswalk that took it to it. Somebody was parked right in it. Everybody see that car? Right there. So needless to say, we went and stood by him and waved our hands and pointed. So we stressed the driver out enough that he actually pulled out so that this gentleman could, in fact, safely walk across with no car there. No exaggeration, right? We did all that. So you can just use us as enforcement if you want. Just send us out in the van. We'd do a good job, wouldn't we? But my real point is, what are some cheaper pathways to this stuff? Well, curbing material or big planters that can be removed. This curbing in Missoula, Montana is at a Safe Routes to School crossing. They largely did it with removable curbing, a paint, and a sign, right? All of which could go away if it turned out to be a disaster, but all of which changed driver behavior and made it safer for pedestrians. Here, again, paint and curbing material in Queens, New York. My only point is there are cheap dates to do some of this kind of stuff. These removable things, the terraces that you've been doing, or many people call them parklets. This is a 2-space parklet, the one on the top right there in Montpelier, Vermont. They take it out in the winter during plowing season. But the businesses, listen closely, the businesses on the street said it's helped the lifeblood of that street, because now people go to the coffee shop, they sit out there. It's sort of expanded the public space, the public realm, and really beautified it. To me, that's a walk, bike, transit enhancement. Right? That's an enhancement. It's also, by the way, a traffic calming tool. It narrows the apparent corridor, and it does slow traffic on that street. They said it's been great for everybody. Third, network of trails. I just want to point out, you've done a lot of thinking about trails. You've got some really cool ones here. You're kind of at a hub in South Central Connecticut. You know, it's sort of a hub for the region. I'd say take that seriously. But again, you're going to have to face that challenge that some of the best, most important sections will be the hardest right-of-way to get. I get that. You're in an urban environment. Right-of-way is not easy to get your hands on. It's no reason not to do it. The critical mile or 2 miles can make all the difference in the world. And you got to be ready to stand up to the NIMBYs, the bananas in the cage. You know who the NIMBYs are, right? Not in my backyard. You know what the banana people say? Build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. We love suburbia. Make it, spread it out. And then the caveman is just the citizen against virtually everything. They just show up at the meeting to scream and yell about whatever you do. So we know when we talk about trail development, they're going to show up. The trails bring rapists. Men with big mustaches will be on the trails. And what we also know is, in fact, we activate corridors that historically were scary and dark and unpatrolled by putting the trail there. Often you activate them, you lighten them, you bring eyes to them, and they're safer environments, right? I mean, I think about some of the sections of the Farmington Canal Greenway Trail through Yale and so on, right? You guys know what I'm talking about. So anyway, my point is, stick to your guns on this. This was your 2004 plan, which I think as part of the comp plan update, there's an amendment to that. Trails should not just be an afterthought sideline amendment. I can't say this strongly enough. We should be integrating them as part of the active transportation network. So I implore you to think about bringing this thinking into your work. Indeed, I've got to read you this Olmsted quote. Okay, so you know Frederick Law Olmsted is a son of Connecticut, right? Everybody knows that, born in Hartford, I hope. Parkways will produce the effect of extending the parks over a much greater area and will provide approaches through which people may pass from their houses to the parks and from one reservation being green spaces, to another, without long, tedious journeys through ordinary city conditions. That could be the 34 West corridor. That could be Edgewood. In fact, Edgewood, arguably, that's what it was designed as, a grand parkway with that center median. I mean, you've got the raw material here. These trails, the trails in the top left picture there, from your trail plan, all could be part of that very network that you've got the heritage of. Where better than New Haven than to model this? Nowhere better than here. Bike-friendly. I just want to say one or two quick things about this. The League of American Bicyclists has a bike-friendly community award program. They recognize businesses, which, if I'm not mistaken, the Connecticut Mental Health Center is a bronze. Does anybody know anything about this? Then New Haven as a city is... I thought, you moved up from honorable mention. You're not honorable mention. You are bronze. And then in Yale is they also do campuses in Yale as a silver. So the point is, aspire to the next. So now you're ready for silver. Does it mean bike share? Does it mean more bike racks? Let me tell you about this little bike rack program in North Adams, Massachusetts. This is a spot on the map, outside of Williamstown. They don't have two middles to rub together. Seriously, an old one of the dead old industrial towns, sort of middle town. Here's the deal. They had a design contest in town to make a design. This is the iconic design. You may see this as an NAMA, North Adams, Mass. Everybody see that if you look? So that's their iconic design. They're being built by a local Votech school, and local businesses donate the money for the materials, then they get the rack, which the city installs to make sure they're properly installed, because they don't want them to be wobbly a year in. So think about the partnerships. The schools, the art programs for the design contest, the Votech school for fabrication, businesses for funding, and the city for installation. Pretty cheap date, they're getting these iconic bike racks around the town at all the institutions that want them, and they'll have more. I just think it's a great example of it's not always the city's job to do it, right? The number of communities where their bike share programs have the support of, so Minneapolis, it's Blue Cross Blue Shield, in Boston, it's New Balance that's ponied up some serious cash. So don't think of bike share that's got to be a city necessarily cost burden. There are ways to work this stuff. I'm telling you here about the Blue Island Bike Club. This is just a nonprofit that is training low-income kids. You have to take a program where you learn both to ride, to do bike fabrication and maintenance, and on-street and skills. My point is they're raising the next generation of bicyclists among their lowest income residents, the very kids who would be least likely to ride because they didn't get their hands on a bike. If you stay through the full program, you keep the bike you built, right? So you've heard about programs like this. I just think it's totally relevant. And another theme that came out of the comp planning document, but also out of our workshop last night, and everything I've heard from everybody in my visits, transit has to become more indispensable in the city. And when I say egalitarian, I want to see a wider range of riders. The successful cities have everybody. There's the guy in the suit sitting right next to the homeless guy, because everybody's riding the bus. In other words, it's not a transportation system of last resort for those who have no other options. That should be your long-term aspiration for transit in the city. And one of the simple ways to do that is the free bus passes for, building bus passes into student IDs. Cities have been very successful. So back to Urbana, Illinois, faculty, staff, and students, all of their IDs act as a transit pass. It's automatic. They've really boosted ridership. Now the transit authority, because of they're collecting a fee from the university for that, it comes right out of student fees. They now have that much more of a working budget to increase frequencies and lower headways on the university-oriented routes. So that means you get that many more riders. It's been a positive cycle versus the traditional downward cycle that we see most transit agencies across the country. One of the themes in particular that came up was connecting Union Station to downtown. That's in your comp plan. Again, it came out of last night's thing, making those links more than just a shuttle, a physical linkage on the ground level. Parking is also a part of transportation demand management. You know this stuff front and back. A guy named Donald Shoup has written sort of the iconic stuff around this. But the bottom line is giving away free parking is an incentive to drive. And by the way, it means everybody is subsidizing the automobile, right? Whoever's underwriting those free parking spaces, however they're being underwritten. So as you become more and more sophisticated in your transportation demand management, this will be a tool that you bring to bear. And safe routes to school, let me just make one point about it. My final one of these, that subset of transportation demand management. You have a challenge that you have a lot of magnet schools, so kids are coming from greater distances than is walking or biking. But as you build the transit system, we've seen cities, again, Urbana, very successfully use the public transit system for the students. And as it's more broadly used, it feels safe and parents are comfortable putting their kids on them. But furthermore, that if you're going to do a program of safe routes to school, school administrators have to be involved. They have to buy it. If it's just the health community coming in doing walking school buses and encouraging the program, don't waste your time. I don't want to sound horrible, but because you'll just be constantly just recruiting the next batch of walking group leaders, and you're not going to actually shift mostly at all. They got to buy in. So in this school in Columbia, Missouri, where parents said, we are not letting our kids walk with the walking school bus, which was, by the way, led by University of Missouri students, your girl in the yellow shirt there, earning community service hours. So they had adult supervision, walking groups of kids in school. Parents wouldn't let the kids walk because the traffic at the school was so bad, they said, I'm afraid they're going to get run over in the last 100 yards. So what do you do instead? Drive my kids. Thereby adding to the traffic at the school that I'm trying. Right? So how do they break that cycle? We didn't walk out there like the one we did last night. We discovered a beautiful park adjoining the school, and at the far end a parking lot that sits dead empty most weekdays. We said, could parents pick up and drop off over there? Neat to the buses. Pick up off and drop off over there. Could the kids walk through the park coming to school? We actually ran a program, they tested it, it's been successful. They now do that as a standard, and, ready for this, they added a policy. If your parent car comes to pick you up at the school at dismissal time, those cars are held for 5 minutes to allow all the pedestrians to clear the ground. So we don't have conflicts where kids are crossing the street and the cars are trying to pull out at the same time. You can imagine, the kids, therefore, who are getting picked up at the school have to sit in the gym for 5 minutes while all the pedestrians and bicyclists and walking bus leaders leave. What do you think we started to hear kids say to their parents?
Stop.
Do not pick me up at the school under any circumstances. I gotta sit in the gym for an hour, Dad.
You're a dork.
Yeah, it's like 5 minutes, but to a kid, that might as well be infinity at the end of the school day. So the kids are now saying to their parents, please pick me up in the far end of the park and let me walk to the bus. Policy change. We had to have the school administrator and the school board on board, but that wasn't going to happen. Don't bother doing it unless you're going to go the whole way. I'm going to tell one last story and we're over. This is a big story. Why this stuff works. It's my anecdote. This guy's walking across the bridge. Is this okay? You guys, this is really it. Oh, he doesn't want to hear the last story. He's walking across the bridge in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, connecting downtown Harrisburg, which is the state capital, to an island called City Island Park. And City Island Park's got on, it's big. It's a big island with the Susquehanna River. We've got a zoo, park, playgrounds, a ball field. The minor league baseball team is there. The guy said, take a picture of this guy. I said, can I take a picture? He said, sure. I said, where are you going? No, here's what I asked him first. I said, do you get a lot of exercise on this bridge? This bridge used to be a car bridge. Now it's only for pedestrians and bicyclists, right? They've made it, and they have a different bridge for cars. They couldn't carry cars anymore. So they turned it into a ped bike bridge. I said, wow, what a cool place to walk. Do you get a lot of exercise because of the bridge? He goes, nah, not really. I'm looking for a story. He's got nothing. I say, well, where are you going? He goes, oh, I park out here. What do you mean? Well, I work downtown at the Capitol, but they only charge $1 to park all day out here. So, because the baseball field, the games are at night. So during the day, all that parking is empty at the ball diamond. So you can. And I said, well, why don't you park downtown? He says, that's $8 or whatever. And they've done this thing they call it traffic calming, where they narrow the street. It's sort of a pain. You know what that is? I said, yeah, I know a little about that. And he says, well, so I just don't want to drive down there. It's easier to park here more. How long does it take you? 15 minutes each way. How often do you do that? I'm thinking he's going to say once a year. I have to get a license renewed or something. He says, oh, every day I work on that. Now, I had asked the guy, do you get any exercise because of the bridge? What did he say? Well, what's he actually getting? 30 minutes. He's meeting the recommendation daily because he doesn't think it's exercise. It's because he's cheap and he's saving $7 a day on parking, $35 a week, $140 a month, which is a perfectly good incentive to me. I don't care whether he thinks it's exercise. Because we know physical inactivity is an independent risk factor, as I told you at the beginning. He's more physically active, he lives a longer, healthier life, he's present at work more often, he's more productive, he makes fewer healthcare claims, he costs us all less in healthcare. We all massively win, and he doesn't think he's exercising, and I don't care. It's because we made an infrastructure, P project, traffic calming, save the bridge, P policy, cheap parking on the island, more expensive parking downtown. We're doing congestion pricing, that's all they're doing. And now this guy's more physically active. I'm a raving lunatic, quite frankly. Not for that guy, not for any of you, but for them. My kids who are 16 and 18 now, but I've frozen in time, 3 and 5, to remind me they're the first generation that's going to have shorter life expectancies than their parents. That generation, shorter life expectancies than us. We can do better. You guys are on your way. Keep it up. Thanks. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. I've been asked to do a little wrap-up with a little Q&A, and I understand that a lot of people might have to duck out. So if you do so, please duck out quietly.
I have one quick question
Please
before I duck out. We're not a question, a comment. Mark, thanks for coming. I had the pleasure of meeting you in Dallas.
Thank you, thank you.
Better here at home.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
And with the city leadership, whoever's left, Doug and others, a friendly amendment to your multimodal transportation assessment.
Good, yes.
Let's also, you know, Doug knows what I'm going to say, have a health impact assessment as part of our policy. These go hand in hand for all the reasons you said.
Yep.
And I hope we can get there.
And in fact, we've done some in Boston, and one of the things I'll offer a thought on this. Just as you think about it, think procedurally how you go forward. Work with the planning people. Work with some developers on this early. Because here's the one thing we don't want. We don't want a health impact assessment to become, in their eyes, like the next EIS, environmental impact statement, such that it's a cumbersome, it's another hurdle to clear, and so that they fight it on principle before they even know what it is. What I have found, some communities have effectively done it by weaving it into the transportation and sort of environmental analyses that are already done, maybe economic impact analysis. We already do lots of that stuff. Most of the health impact stuff, if you really think about what we do in an HIA, it can be woven into those, not be made a new procedural step, just from the standpoint of acknowledging the developer's sort of concerns, their intrinsic concerns about it. 100% with you on it, though.
Thank you.
I totally back you up on it. And I'm right there, and I'm helping communities actually develop their approaches to that. So, yes, good amendment.
Thank you, Doug. Any other questions about what we're doing in New Haven, or what we need, or any comments about what we need to be doing in New Haven together to promote this?
Doug, I mean, I know most left that were there last night. I know between there were 2 meetings last night, so I was at the New Haven Promise meeting, and so I guess my question is how is this being intertwined with the New Haven Promise information? Because it's not quite as explicit, I think, as I would like. And what support, just speaking on behalf of businesses, the Healthcare Council of Greater New Haven Chamber, how can businesses get involved in helping?
In helping the broader building a healthier...
Just supporting you to get these ordinances passed and policies, and what kind of support can we give you? Not just financial, but just in kind and advocacy.
Absolutely.
Right?
I was just going to say, that's really important.
Mark is bringing up a lot of what we've been talking in New Haven for the last 6-7 years. He's done it in a much more concise, much more informative, much more fun way. But I will say, we are preaching to a lot of choir here in the room. But how do you get the choir to sing? And so we do need your help when we're going out there trying to, this year, Mark didn't mention tonight, you mentioned it last night, we have a silly law in the state of Connecticut that does not allow us to build 2-way cycle tracks on street. So the 2-way protected bike lane with the paint and the bollards that Mark showed, that's illegal in the state of Connecticut. We're going to be doing that. Roland Lamar is going to be really advocating for that, and Beth Bai, Senator from West Hartford. When that comes around, we need you to write a letter. We need you to do the little things. We don't necessarily...
You guys could be a test case on that.
Yeah.
It would be great for you to say, because that's how engineering departments change their rules on that stuff. DOTs say, all right, we'll do a pilot. We'll let New Haven pilot it, prove that it works, and then we'll roll that out. So, but we would need your weight on that.
So let us know. We have 12,000 employees.
Really good.
And for
really good.
For the Promise application specifically, there is some mention of our transportation networks and the plans of what we're doing in the next 2 years. But I'll say that this is completely my fault. If it's not in there, that's my fault. I'm going to walk into Martha's office, our CSA, Community Service Administrator, and find out how to make this more evident.
Wait,
I was just going to make the point that active neighborhood associations and community management teams sit at the center between those two plans. It's with CARE and with Yale Haven Hospital and with Doug's help that we're plotting out a 1, 2, 3, 5-mile signed walking trail in our neighborhood, which is one of the 6 poorest neighborhoods in the city of New Haven. And we're working with that on one end, and at the other end, we're working with Connecticut Main Street and New Haven Promise to bring that sort of awareness to our residents. We already have 3 walking groups in our neighborhood, but what it takes is engagement of the city and of institutions like Yale and Yale New Haven Hospital with active residents. In 2008, we did a resident fundraise traffic study to traffic calm in our neighborhood. And we've been sitting on that study for 8 years, since 2008, and now finally Doug is helping us to realize some of those things in our neighborhood. So it's happening in New Haven, and that's out in Fairhaven.
And effectively, from the 2004 Greenway, this is actually what the residents mapped without knowing that the 2004 map existed.
Right.
Which shows, our city staff really understands our neighborhood's concerns in the sense when our bureaucrats put it together, it actually maps exactly the natural flow. Probably with some feedback from back in 2002.
It shows the consistency from residents. Even though residents are changing, the same ideas keep coming back from the residents. We want to walk around our neighborhood.
Other questions? I've just got goosebumps thinking about it, and it's really not any one entity talking about it. It's really, not to be cheesy, but it's really better together when we're all at the same table working together through Get Healthy CT, through all of these efforts in our neighborhoods. The CARE survey, the triennial health survey in 6 of our more challenging neighborhoods has definitely highlighted that. Upwards of 70-75% of people do not feel safe walking around. Upwards of 60% during the day. Just stop right there. This is not about lighting necessarily. This is also just more bodies will be helpful. City engineers Giovanni Zinn did take off, and Mike Carter, the CAO, who's in charge of public works and public services. We're in the midst of a gigantic light overhead street light replacement program to put LED bright white light in. Helps with the spectrum. We had our first test case scenario on Lilac Street in Newhallville 2 years ago. It came out. We saw a 50% reduction in crime. And we saw an increase in walking and the perception of safety for that neighborhood. So we definitely have our challenges, but as we work together, we'll all help each other feel more safe. Other questions or thoughts? Yes.
What kind of, to Mark's point, what kind of lighter, quicker, cheaper options are we looking at?
Well, it's almost as though we brought Mark here because he was preaching everything that we've been speaking about for the last 6 months. Things that Mark mentioned are the NACTA, National Association of City Transportation Officials. There's a very big, there's almost a bit of a street fight, pardon the pun, with city transportation officials versus state highway transportation officials. It was the Department of Highways not too long ago, now it's Connecticut DOT. And so you're seeing our city engineers and our city traffic officials say, guys, this is crazy. All I want to do is get across the street to buy a newspaper. And so we're seeing things like paint, planters, delineator tubes. Things that are up here right now. The bike lane that we're talking about on Edgewood Avenue, and again, we're going to be rolling this out through the community throughout the entire winter and building it sometime in May if the community wants it and actually agrees with Giovanni's end of my description. The bike lane we were doing is $70,000 for 2.1 miles.
Wow.
That's $35,000 per mile.
That's a cheap date, man.
That is a cheap date.
It really is,
paint,
on scale.
Delineator tubes. We don't need to do any signaling because there's already traffic lights. We're designing things in the ease of actually getting it completed. Giovanni's, he came to me a couple weeks ago and he just looks at me very fraught and says, all of our elected officials, by the way, thank you Alder Marchand for coming, a member of the City Plan Commission, as well as a very, very active walker and biker. All of our city officials and all of our residents are getting frustrated with this complete streets process. We were the second entity in the country to pass a complete streets ordinance. We had a great Complete Streets design manual come out in 2010 with a Complete Streets application, but there's been terrible feedback loops for the residents. Myself included, I was the first ever applicant of a Complete Streets project, and I was exceptionally frustrated for 4 years until that project magically was almost finished, and then Mark showed it 100 times tonight. It was the Whitney Audubon intersection. But we've been making those strides to actually help our residents have more feedback, and that's the back end stuff. But moving forward, we're going to be doing about 30 projects in the next 7 months over the first half of 2015 through the help of city staff, some consultants, but mainly through the help of the community helping us lift, because we can't do this alone. So January, February, March, April, we're going to be coming out to management team meetings through our alders, and we're going to be working together to make these small, tactical, urbanist pilot programs. I'm using all these words that are, as Mark mentioned, reversible. You know, building a 200,000. This is a complete product. But if we have just paint and bollards, we can do so much. We can do a lot at that intersection, the corner of Monitor Square. We can activate that with the West River Neighborhood Services Corporation. We have great neighborhood leaders over there that will be willing to have a Santa event on a Saturday or a Sunday, that are willing to schedule a 3-piece jazz band to come out on a Saturday and a Sunday. And we can build it with paint, with the linear tubes, and these little duckies. It's not much, and we have to do more with less. Mayor Hart's been very clear. So thank you. So that's what we can do. We've actually proposed, we'll be submitting the ordinance to adopt, with our partners at the Board of Alders, to adopt NACTO and append it to our Complete Streets Guide. We have requested, put it on our legislative agenda for the state of Connecticut to adopt NACTO as the Complete Streets Manual, design manual. And we're working with our state traffic officials to make sure that we can do things like 2-way cycle tracks, because everyone in our neighborhoods is begging for this. And I frustrate them immensely when I bring up technical brush-offs. And I know it, I was an advocate, I was a resident, I was an alder. You know, transportation officials, we always try and brush you off by saying, well, this guy can't do that, there's too much volume on this road, this, that, and the other. But we have to find more ways to solve it, and Mayor Hart's been very clear, we have to do this in every neighborhood, and we will. Other questions before we sort of wrap up?
I'm just going to throw a thought out that one of the partial answers to this is if you create a very specific to-do list, like the MMTA, and here's how we're going to implement it, these 3 things in the update to the comp plan and the zoning ordinance, these 6 projects, that kind of a list, the more specific and detailed you get, so you can give it out, so somebody like you can then take that back to your peers, and you can take it back to your peers. I was really delighted to hear about the role you play, so thanks for your comment. And also, the role you could play, because when a physician shows up at a public hearing and says, you know, when you say the 3 numbers, I just want to remind everybody in the room that although everybody should get 30 minutes a day, fewer than 10% of us do, I struggle to get my patients to be able to get out and walk simply because they don't have a place they feel they can do it. And the cost to us is this, you know, you put that number, the quality of life cost, the dollar cost of that person being on diabetes meds for the next 20 years of their life until they suffer an amputation and then dialysis and then die. This is what we pay. You know, when you say those words, it means a lot more. And so if we have a bingo list, if you guys come out of this process, your comp planning process, with specific, and everybody brings to bear on them, there's no way they don't happen. But I really do think coming up with a clear hit list of priority projects makes it a lot easier for everybody to step out on them. Because you can't always just keep doing the broad platitudes. Let's make it more walkable, let's make it more bikeable. Tell me the specific thing you want me to do.
Right, exactly.
And alders can respond to that, your state ledge can respond, everybody, you know.
Businesses can-
Give me the specific thing you're asking me. They want to know, when you go in to do legislative advocacy, what's the ask? What's the specific ask? I mean, you know, that's what staff always say when you go in, right? I find that at the state and the federal level. So, but anyway, so thank you for your 2 examples.
I have sort of a technical question. What do you think of exclusive pedestrian phasing that might be happening versus giving pedestrians the leading signal or concurrent signals?
So the one that I'm seeing used a lot is the leading pedestrian thing now, where you give the pedestrian 2 or 3 seconds ahead, but don't give them an entire phase, which is really costly from the you know, just from the time standpoint. For the engineer who's trying to phase an intersection, and if you give me a pedestrian-only phase, the other thing is that you end up having very long waits between those, right? So it's a long wait, then I get this phase, it's an all-stop phase, but I've waited for, and so what you kind of see is pedestrians tend to go for it when they think the light is with them, as it were, right? So my experience, and sort of when I talk to colleagues who are doing this work around the country, there are certain intersections where that's the right call, and then you allow the scramble crossing to the diagonal crossing. Let them, if you're going to do an all stop, let them go across diagonally, and at least, you know what I mean, so you don't have to do 2 legs. This is sort of geeky detail stuff. But anyway, my point is the lead interval sort of gives you put the pedestrian out there, makes them visible for the turning vehicle without having to create the entire phasing, so you end up don't having as long. So my short answer is I say go that way first if you can work it out, but every intersection different, how many turning movements, is there a right on red, isn't there, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and that might be a place where that's right, where that's the right call, where you say, no, this is one where we're going to stop everybody, but then let's go and stripe out have you seen where they actually stripe the diagonal crossing markings and tell the pedestrian you can cross diagonally because it's an all-stop phase? So you see those in DC, and what happens is pedestrians take over the intersection, and then they're almost willing to wait because they don't have to do a 2-leg crossing.
You've seen it for down at York and South Frontage, when we have don't block the box, we have all of the checkers in there. That allows people to cross anywhere they want. But we need to do much more of it.
And the education and information is really important to get that stuff
And if
right.
anybody's really interested on when we're going to see concurrent phase crossing in New Haven, Connecticut, come talk to me afterwards. But thank you, Mark, so much.
No, my pleasure.
I just wanted to take a minute. I'm Christian Engel. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Central Connecticut Coast YMCA. And I know we just gave a round of applause, but again, I wanted to thank Mark, a small token of our appreciation for coming out. So thank you very much. People have asked, why is the Y doing this? From our standpoint, we want to see New Haven get healthier. We want to see this improve. And not only is what we're about, we know it's what about being part of the community is about. So our initiative in bringing Mark into town, our work with Doug, our work with CARE, we're at the table with Get Healthy Connecticut, and a partnership for Healthier New Haven is all about moving this stuff forward. And more importantly, last night and tonight, we're about getting conversations going. The Y wants to be at the table. We know Yale does. We know Yale University does. We know the city does. We know everybody does. And this is a great kickoff. I think Doug's looking for advocates as well. So I think it's important that we don't leave here and go, hey, that was a great breakfast, and everybody go back to work and forget about it. There's a lot of work taking place through not only Get Healthy Connecticut, but also work going on through the city and work with the YMCA that we just want to make sure that everybody is kind of aware of and understanding of. So again, this for us was a great kickoff and a great opportunity to kind of bring people together to have this conversation. So thank you for coming this morning in this weather. We really appreciate it, and everybody please be safe going back to work. So thank you very much.
Really fantastic.
It was a tough start. So
Now you're kind.
Hi, Mark Mendy, the Department of One in Arts and Culture.
Oh, good for you, man.
I just think we need to also incorporate the reference the arts community.
I completely agree.
We always feel like
Just kidding, man.
design.